The city of Los Angeles shimmered below, a sprawling grid of light and motion, but in the glass-walled study of his Bel Air mansion, Elon Musk felt like a stranger in his own world. At 53, he'd bent the arc of history. SpaceX rockets pierced the heavens, Tesla's electric dreams rewired the roads, and XAI pushed the boundaries of thought itself. Yet tonight, as he stared out at the distant pulse of humanity, something gnawed at him. The world he'd built for the common person was a mystery to him, its struggles reduced to data points and headlines. He was a titan, untouchable, but disconnected. The spark had come months earlier, a fleeting moment in a Tesla factory's break room. A janitor, his voice rough with exhaustion, spoke to a co-worker about a medical bill. A single, cruel twist that stole his apartment and left him sleeping in a rusted sedan. Elon lingered nearby, unseen, the man's words sinking into him like a splinter. Not a plea, but a quiet surrender. Guilt stirred, then curiosity, then a question he couldn't shake. What did survival feel like when you had nothing? He'd designed solutions for billions, but had he ever walked a mile in their shoes? That night, the question became a decision. Not a stunt for headlines or a noble experiment to flaunt, but a raw, reckless need to know. He would leave it all behind, his wealth, his name, his empire, and step into the unknown. By dawn, he'd made his choice. No press, no safety net, no whispered calls to allies, just him, a plain hoodie, worn jeans, and a single $20 bill tucked into his pocket. As he walked away from his mansion, the hum of his Tesla fading behind him, fear crept in. A sensation foreign to a man who'd gambled billions on rocket launches and market wars. This wasn't the calculated risk of a boardroom. It was primal, unshaped, a leap into a void he couldn't predict. The sun dipped low as he reached downtown LA, its streets alive with laughter and luxury. Couples sipped wine at outdoor cafes. Ferraris purred past, their drivers oblivious to the figure trudging by in scuffed shoes. For the first time in decades, Elon wasn't the center of gravity. He was a speck, unnoticed, and the weight of that invisibility pressed against his chest. Night fell like a hammer. His feet ached, his stomach grumbled, a faint echo of hunger he hadn't felt since his scrappy startup days. He wandered, aimless, until he found a homeless shelter on a gritty corner of Skid Row. A line snaked around the block, tired faces, tattered coats, eyes dulled by resignation. He joined them, hesitant, his polished demeanor out of place. A volunteer, harried and overworked, glanced at him. "We're full," she said flatly. "Try tomorrow." "Sir." The words landed like a punch. Tomorrow? He had nowhere else. The line dispersed and he was left standing, the city's neon glow mocking his solitude. He drifted into an alley, the air thick with the stench of damp cardboard and something sharper. Decay, perhaps, or despair. Shadows moved. People huddled in blankets, some asleep, others staring blankly into the dark. He sank against a cold brick wall, hoodie pulled tight. The city's symphony of honks, sirens, and distant laughter blending into a chaotic, uncaring roar. He'd faced the uncertainty of space, but this was different. For the first time in his life, Elon Musk felt truly alone. Morning clawed through the haze, gray and unforgiving. He hadn't slept. Every creak, every shout jolted him awake. His back throbbed from the pavement, his joints screaming in protest. Hunger gnawed deeper now, a relentless ache that sharpened his thoughts. He reached for the $20 bill, its edges worn from his restless grip. How far could it stretch when he didn't know if more would come? The question was alien to a man who'd never counted pennies, who'd signed deals worth billions without a second thought. He stumbled into a convenience store, the fluorescent lights harsh against his sunken eyes. The clerk, a middle-aged man with a permanent scowl, tracked him as he shuffled through the aisles. His clothes, expensive once, now hung loose, his unshaven face marking him as an outsider. "You buying something?" the clerk snapped, his tone edged with suspicion. Elon grabbed a sandwich, $7, the cheapest he could find, and handed over the bill. The change, $13, felt like a lifeline slipping through his fingers. Outside, he sat on the curb, tearing into the bread, the plastic wrap crinkling in his hands. People streamed by, businessmen on phones, tourists snapping photos, their gazes sliding past him. Invisible. The word echoed in his mind, heavy and final. That's when he met Charlie. A wiry man with gray-streaked hair and a torn jacket approached, his hands buried in his pockets. "First time?" he asked, nodding at the sandwich. Elon froze, then nodded, unsure how to respond. Charlie crossed the street to a dumpster behind a fast food joint, rummaging with practiced ease. He pulled out a half-eaten burger, still in its wrapper, and inspected it like a jeweler appraising a gem. "Dry stuff's best," he said, tossing it to Elon. The smell hit first, grease and stale bread, but hunger overruled pride. He bit down, the taste a mix of shame and survival. Charlie chuckled, a dry, knowing sound. "You'll get used to it." They sat on Skid Row that night, the pavement cold beneath them, the city's pulse a distant hum. Charlie's voice was low, roughened by years of hard living. "Worked a factory for 20 years. One day it's gone. Severance lasted 6 months, then the landlord kicked me out. Been here 3 years. Elon listened, the weight of it sinking in. "What's your story?" Charlie asked, his eyes glinting with curiosity. Elon hesitated, the instinct to lie tugging at him. But something about the moment, the rawness of it, demanded truth. "I ran a business," he said carefully. "A big one." Charlie's laugh was sharp, disbelieving. "Yeah? What happened?" Elon exhaled, staring at the cracked pavement. "Wanted to see how the other half lives." Charlie shook his head, grinning. "You're nuts, man." But as the city hummed around them, Elon felt the truth settle like a stone. One day in, and he was already fraying. The second dawn was colder, sharper. His body screamed, joints stiff, muscles bruised from the ground. Charlie stirred beside him, rubbing his face with calloused hands. "Lesson 1. The pavement's your enemy. Wears you down faster than hunger." Elon rolled his shoulders, feeling every word. Hunger gnawed again, the sandwich a distant memory. Charlie had a plan. "Can't wait for handouts," he said as they walked through streets lined with pawn shops and liquor stores. "Most don't care, and the ones who do get tired." They stopped at a gas station near the freeway, its neon sign flickering. Charlie showed him the hustle, approaching a driver, offering to pump gas and clean the windshield. The man, a middle-aged guy in a polo shirt, hesitated, then nodded. Charlie worked fast, his movements precise, and earned a crumpled $5 bill. "See?" he said to Elon, pocketing the cash. "Give 'em something and they pay." Elon tried, awkwardly at first. A woman in a minivan waved him off, her eyes avoiding his. A man in a suit ignored him entirely, talking into his earpiece. By the 4th try, he got it. Timing mattered. A truck rolled in, its windshield a graveyard of bugs from a long highway drive. Elon grabbed a dirty rag from Charlie and wiped it clean as the driver pumped gas. The man, grizzled and road-weary, chuckled. "Making your drive clearer, huh?" He handed Elon $1, the bill soft from years of use. It was a pittance, but it burned in his pocket like a victory, $1 earned, not given. The streets weren't kind to rookies. Wandering through an alley later that day, Elon spotted a brown paper bag near a trash bin, half a sandwich inside, barely touched. His stomach growled, urging him forward. He reached for it, but a growl stopped him cold. "That's mine." A thin man with sunken eyes loomed, his posture radiating aggression. His clothes were filthier than Charlie's, his knuckles scarred. Elon stammered. "I didn't know—" Charlie appeared, hands raised. "He's new! Easy!" The man glared, then snatched the bag and stalked off, muttering curses. Charlie sighed, his voice low. "Lesson 2. Don't take what ain't yours. People'll kill over scraps. Elon nodded, the weight of the rules settling in. Survival wasn't just about food. It was about respect, territory, and the thin line between peace and violence. That night, violence bared its fangs. They'd settled near a parking garage, the concrete still warm from the day's heat, when shouts erupted across the street. Two men argued in front of a liquor store. One older, toothless, wearing layers of torn clothing. The other younger, twitchy, his eyes wild like he was on something. "I saw you take it!" the younger yelled, his voice cracking with rage. The older man raised his hands, protesting, "I ain't got nothing!" Then, in a flash, a rusty knife appeared in the younger man's hand. Elon tensed, his heart pounding as the blade sliced through the air. The older man stumbled back, clutching his arm where blood bloomed, dark and glistening. The younger spat on the ground, muttering something unintelligible, and bolted into the shadows. The wounded man limped away, disappearing into the dark, his gasps fading. Elon turned to Charlie, his voice shaking. "Where's the police?" Charlie's eyes were flat, resigned.
"They don't come here, man. No one cares."
The truth hit like a freight train. This wasn't a temporary hardship for the people around him. This was survival, brutal and unending. Morning brought Derek. Taller than Charlie, he carried himself with a quiet confidence, his worn clothes neater than most. Charlie introduced them as they sat on a curb, sharing a bottle of water Derek had scrounged. "This is Derek. Used to be a software guy." Elon's brow lifted, intrigued. Derek smirked, his eyes sharp despite the fatigue. "Yeah, had a startup in the valley. It tanked. Then my marriage, my savings, my house. Now this." The echo of Elon's world hit hard. A man who'd once coded dreams, pitched to venture capitalists, lived in the same orbit of ambition, now scavenging for scraps. "Word of advice," Derek said, leaning close, his voice low and serious. "This isn't a game. You've got that look. Someone who's never fought to live." Elon bristled, his pride flaring, but he stayed silent. Derek was right. He'd faced bankruptcy, lawsuits, rocket failures, but never this. Never the raw, grinding fight for the next meal, the next hour. "How do you get out?" Elon asked, his voice steady but urgent. Derek's laugh was bitter, cutting. "You don't. Not really." The words hung between them, heavy with truth, but Elon's mind rebelled. There had to be a way. He'd always found one before. Days blurred into a haze of hunger and exhaustion. The hunger wasn't just an ache now. It was a parasite, burrowing into his thoughts, dulling his edges. His body weakened, his polished confidence eroding under the weight of sleepless nights and concrete beds. Derek watched him falter one morning, his smirk both cruel and knowing. "You want to eat today? Beg." The word was a slap, an insult to everything Elon had ever stood for. "No!" he snapped, his voice sharp. Charlie chuckled, leaning back against a wall. "How else you gonna eat, man? Ain't no factories hiring out here." Pride warred with necessity, and necessity won, as it always did on the streets. Swallowing the knot in his throat, Elon stepped onto a bustling sidewalk near a shopping district. Businessmen in tailored suits, mothers pushing strollers, teenagers with earbuds. They moved like a river, their lives untouched by the man in the hoodie. "Excuse me," he stammered to a man in a gray blazer, his voice dry. "Got $1?" The man didn't break stride, his eyes fixed ahead. 5 rejections followed, each a dagger to his dignity. By the 7th, shame burned hot, a feeling he hadn't known since childhood. Then an elderly woman paused, her face lined with years of kindness. She looked at him, really looked, and reached into her purse. "Get yourself something warm, dear," she said, pressing a crumpled dollar into his hand. He stared at it, a tear threatening to fall. Not from joy, but from the weight of what he'd become. $1. The hardest money he'd ever earned. Shame wasn't the only teacher. Back on Skid Row, he sat with Charlie and Derek, the dollar clutched in his hand. "It's not just about food," he murmured, his voice hoarse. Derek raised an eyebrow, curious. "What?" Elon looked up, his eyes burning with a realization that cut deeper than hunger. "It's about dignity. They look at you like you're nothing." Derek's smirk faded, replaced by a flicker of respect. Charlie nodded slowly. "That's the real cost out here. Ain't no price tag on it." Elon had spent his life pushing boundaries, breaking barriers, defying gravity, rewriting rules. But now, he was just another man on the street, invisible to the world he'd once commanded. That single dollar had shattered something inside him, but it also lit a spark. He wasn't done. Not yet. The breaking point came on the 5th day. He sat on the curb, knees pulled to his chest, staring at the cracked pavement. Hunger clawed relentlessly now, his body sluggish, his mind fogged. Exhaustion wasn't just physical. It was a weight, a suffocating hopelessness that whispered surrender.
How do you do this every day?
He rasped, his voice barely audible. Derek's answer was cold, unyielding. "You don't think about tomorrow. You don't think about next week. Just the next meal." Charlie leaned forward, his eyes hard. "Figure something out fast or you're done." Elon Musk, solver of impossible problems, architect of futures, had no answers. His empire was a distant memory, his power irrelevant. All he had was a question. How do I survive? And for the first time, he had no idea. But surrender wasn't in his wiring. Something stubborn, unyielding, stirred beneath the despair. "I don't want to survive," he said, his voice firm despite the tremor. "I want out." Charlie chuckled, shaking his head. "Everyone wants out." Derek listed the paths with brutal clarity. 3 ways. 1, you get lucky. Some rich guy feels bad, gives you a job or a place, rare as hell. 2, crime. Run drugs, steal, scam, ends in jail or a grave. 3, hustle. Work your ass off, save every penny, claw your way up. Takes years, if you don't break first. Elon's jaw tightened. Years weren't an option. He'd built companies against impossible odds, turned dreams into steel and code. There had to be a way. He'd find it. He threw himself into the hustle. Gas station windshields, carrying groceries at corner markets, sweeping sidewalks for shop owners. Every dollar counted, every cent a brick in his escape. He learned the rhythm of the streets, the best corners, the right words, the moments when people's guards were down. Rejection still stung, but he pushed through, his mind sharpening despite his body's protests. Then came Maria, a food truck owner swamped during a lunch rush near Pershing Square. Her apron was stained with grease, her voice sharp as she barked orders to a lone cook. Elon approached, his hands wiped clean on his jeans. "Let me help," he said. She eyed him, skeptical, her arms crossed. "You ever worked food?" He met her gaze, unflinching. "I've run businesses. I learn fast." Maria hesitated, then tossed him an apron. "Screw up and you're out." And for 6 hours he took orders, cleaned trays, ran to the back for supplies, his hands blistered, his shirt soaked with sweat. By the end, Maria handed him $25, her expression softer. "Not bad, newbie." It wasn't much, but it was his. Earned, not begged. That night he bought a meal, not scraps, his own. A cheap taco from a street vendor, the spices sharp and real. As he ate, sitting on a low wall under a flickering streetlight, something shifted. He wasn't just scraping by, he was building. The $25 was a spark, but perception was the key. He stopped relying on chance and started strategizing. Every dollar went to necessity: a clean shirt from a thrift store, a razor, a bar of soap bought for 99 cents. He cleaned up in a public restroom, the cracked mirror reflecting a man he barely recognized. His beard was gone, his posture straighter. When he walked into a cafe the next day and asked for a job, the manager, a woman with tired eyes and a clipboard, didn't recoil.
Come back tomorrow, she said. Might need a dishwasher.
It was a crack in the wall, a glimpse of possibility. Elon realized the brutal truth. Poverty's cage wasn't just money. It was how the world saw you. People didn't help the homeless. They helped those who looked like they were already climbing. A clean shirt, a steady voice. It changed everything. The hustle grew. He worked the cafe's dish pit when they called him, his hands pruning in soapy water for $10 an hour. He kept the food truck gig, earning Maria's grudging respect. Every dollar was saved, counted, planned. He stopped sleeping in alleys. Too risky, Charlie had warned after a night when gunshots echoed nearby. Instead, he found corners near 24-hour laundromats, where the hum of machines and the glow of lights offered a fragile sense of safety. His body still ached, but his mind was alive, plotting paths, weighing risks. Then came Frank, a retired mechanic who frequented the cafe. Gray-haired and gruff, he'd watched Elon scrub dishes with a quiet intensity. One day, as Elon swept the sidewalk outside, Frank approached. "You don't belong out here," he said, his voice blunt but not unkind. Elon paused, broom in hand, trying not to stay. Frank nodded as if he'd expected the answer. "Got a room in my garage. Tiny, but it's got a cot and a roof, $100 a month." Elon stared, the offer almost unreal. A roof, a bed, freedom. "Deal," he said, his voice steady despite the tremor in his chest. Frank handed him a key, and just like that, Elon Musk was no longer homeless. He told Charlie and Derek the next day, sitting on their usual curb near a shuttered pawn shop. Charlie laughed, a deep, disbelieving sound. "You're a damn miracle, man. How the hell'd you pull that off?" Derek just stared, his usual smirk gone. "You actually got out," he murmured, his voice tinged with something like awe. Elon exhaled, shaking his head. "Not yet. Not completely." He wasn't done, not by a long shot. The room was a start, a foothold, but the streets still clung to him, their lessons etched into his bones. He'd tasted despair, felt the weight of invisibility, and he couldn't unsee it. The world he'd returned to would never look the same. A month after he'd vanished, Elon walked into a Tesla office in Hawthorne. His jeans were faded, his plain shirt creased from a week's wear. His assistant, Miles, nearly dropped his coffee, his eyes wide. "Jesus, Elon, where the hell have you been?" Elon smiled, a quiet, knowing curve of his lips. "Learning." He didn't call a press conference or tweet a cryptic thread. He got to work. Within a week, he'd assembled a team, not his usual cadre of engineers, but a mix of social workers, educators, and a few trusted advisors who'd seen the fire in his eyes and didn't ask questions. Within a month, he'd bought an old warehouse in downtown LA, its brick walls crumbling but sturdy enough for a vision. Within 3 months, it was transformed, not into a shelter, but something greater. A training center for the homeless, a bridge from the streets to stability. Coding classes, business workshops, job placement programs, tools to rebuild lives, not just bandage wounds. He named it Nexus, a nod to the connections it would forge. The first to walk through its doors were Charlie and Derek. Charlie, skeptical but curious, signed up for a logistics course, his years in a factory giving him an edge. Derek enrolled in a coding boot camp, his old skills rusty but not gone. Elon watched them from the sidelines, his presence quiet, almost invisible. He wasn't their savior. He was their proof that the path existed. Months later, as the center hummed with activity, Derek found him outside, the sun dipping low over the city. Derek had changed. His clothes were clean, his backpack replaced by a laptop bag. He'd landed a job, a small startup gig, but it was his. "You really did this," he said, shaking his head. Elon nodded, his voice soft. Had to. Derek smirked, a flicker of his old edge returning. So what now, genius? Elon smiled, his gaze fixed on the horizon. We keep going. The sun set, casting long shadows across streets he'd once called home. Alleys where he'd slept, corners where he'd begged, curbs where he'd broken. He'd left his empire to taste life at its rawest edge, to answer a question that had haunted him. What he found wasn't just survival, it was humanity, stripped bare and resilient. The lessons were brutal. Money was power, but dignity was life. Perception was a cage, but persistence could break it. No one was coming to save you, but you could save yourself. He'd returned to his world, but he carried the streets with him, their weight a reminder of the millions still fighting battles he'd only glimpsed. Nexus grew, its model spreading to other cities, San Francisco, Chicago, Miami. It wasn't charity, it was strategy, a system to rewrite futures. Elon didn't stand on stages to boast about it. He let the results speak. Hundreds trained, dozens employed, lives reclaimed. Charlie got a warehouse job, his first steady paycheck in years. Derek's startup took off, a modest success that felt like a mountain scaled. And Elon? He was quieter now, his relentless drive tempered by a new clarity. He'd built rockets to reach the stars, but this was about lifting people from the dirt. Years later, he stood outside Nexus, the LA skyline glittering in the distance. A young woman approached, her eyes bright but wary. She'd heard about the center, about the man who'd walked the streets and came back to build it. "Is it true?" she asked. "Can I really get out?" Elon looked at her, seeing Charlie's resignation, Derek's fire, his own hunger reflected back. "It's true," he said, "but you've got to fight for it." She nodded, clutching a worn backpack, and stepped inside. He watched her go, the weight of the past grounding him. He'd been the richest man alive, and he'd been nothing. Both had shaped him, but only one had shown him what mattered. The city hummed around him, alive and unforgiving. He'd left his empire to understand its shadows, and in them, he'd found a purpose greater than wealth or fame. The streets had broken him, rebuilt him, and sent him back to change the world, not for the powerful, but for the forgotten. And as the stars blinked awake above, Elon Musk knew he'd keep fighting, because the hardest battles were the ones worth winning.
The streets don't spare the dreamers. They chew and spit you out. A name once etched in headlines now whispers through the doubt. $1 in his pocket, a tear he wouldn't cry. From rockets into gutters, he learned how not to die. But hunger ain't the only thing that carves you to the bone. It's the eyes that look right through you, like you've never had a home. He said, I don't wanna survive, I wanna fight to rise. With every scar and broken night, he found the fire behind his eyes. From silence came a purpose, from pain a battle cry. He said, I don't wanna survive, I wanna fight to rise. A taco bought with blisters, a job from just one shot. The streets taught ruthless lessons that schoolrooms never taught. that doesn't make the news, but in the eyes of strangers, he paid his deepest dues. He said, I don't want to survive, I want to fight to rise. He cleaned his soul in dishpan soap and shook off all the lies. They said you don't come back from nothing, but they never met his pride. He said, I don't want to survive, I want to fight, fight, fight to rise. Now he builds more than rockets, he builds bridges through the pain. For every soul still sleeping out in cold November rain. He ain't their savior, just a mirror of what they still could be. If you fight hard enough, even the streets might set you free.